Interviews with business owners and veteran executives who share their wisdom and expertise to help you de-stress, free up time, and make more money. Prophets of IT. Welcome back to the Prophets of IT. I am Jim Punzenberger, your host and the creator of the Managed Prospecting System. If you're looking to generate new leads or appointments without cold calling, ad spend, or spamming, check out managedprospectingsystem.com. I have Mike Salazar today with me as a prophet. Mike, please introduce yourself and tell us a quick bit about what you do in the industry.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. So like you said, my name is Mike Salazar, and I'm the Vice President of Sales and Strategy for a company called Alert Enterprise. And what I do in the IT industry is I help people solve problems. I make new friends and I get paid for it. So I'm pretty excited.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So what's something interesting about yourself outside of work?
Outside of work, I think most people don't know that I'm a licensed foster parent. I have adopted 2 children from foster care, biological sisters, well over 10 years ago. And as a child, I probably should have been in foster care. That's interesting. And that's what actually drives me for work, is that ultimately I can learn enough and make enough to have an impact across foster care, over the next 20 years.
Sounds like a very noble thing.
We'll see. Yeah, it's a problem that's not as much mobile for us as it is. It's just a huge problem that no one seems to address. And there's a lot of marginalized people in this situation, and there's a lot of root causes. And so you can start to tackle problems and see their impact, and then tackle problems and see their impact. It's the same thing I do with strategic leaders.
Got it. So shifting to business now, what would you say is your superpower when it comes to business?
Superpowers definitely has to be my neurodivergent brain. I don't see the world like everyone else. And so I see, usually I see kind of like a databases, if you will. So if you imagine like a very non-relational database setup, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, you index it all, and then you start to see like correlations. That's pretty much how my brain works. So I see big anomalies and I see big clusters. And so when I see a cluster, I'm like, wait a second, hey, Jim's a cluster over here. When someone lightens that up, I'm like, hey, this might not make sense right now, but trust me, there's some stuff here. If you work with context, then you make it contextually aware, offer that up. Usually it's kind of this like, how did you think of that? Or how did you come to that conclusion? It makes so much sense. That's just how my brain works. So I would say that's my superpower.
Cool. So is this something that you've always had, or did you develop over time? How did this come about?
Yeah, great question. It came about through having a life at home that was not supposed to be known about in public, right? So I came from a very broken home. And so in public, you had to look a certain way and act a certain way. And learning how to do those things created some dynamic parts of my brain. And it allowed basically me to figure out how to circumvent systems is probably the best way to put it. And so one of the first rewards that I got from education or institutions was a reward for 1,000 ways to figure out not to do my homework, right? So I wasn't necessarily the kid that everyone was like, wait, this is a major problem kid and completely in trouble. Like I'd be in trouble, but the teacher was like, I don't know, I'm really happy about this, but you seem to have gotten other kids interested in learning and doing the other things, that they kind of let me do other things. So that's where I saw my first like neurodivergency come in, where it was like, I had to figure out how to function a little different. And so my whole career, I sound like a sales guy, I act like a sales guy. And then when people start to really do deals with me, they're like, wait a second, you're not a traditional salesperson. Why are you telling me to go over to these companies? And so that's when I realized that the way that I function outside of like normal thinking actually is that superpower. So it's always kind of been with me. It's been, if I'm, really looking at some of the clarity coming out where I started to use it as a superpower, it really wasn't until the last, I want to say 3-4 years, and really been accelerating through the recalibration of work, through mentorship and coaching, of people saying, hey, you really should take advantage of that as a superpower and not actually as like a vulnerability. So
do you have any tips for people that may want to develop neurodivergence as their own superpower?
Yeah, so I would say developing neurodivergency, that would be an interesting, I don't know the science behind that one. I know the science behind, having a neurodivergent brain and functioning. I would say that the advice I could give is mostly from people who have neurodivergent brain or ADHD or things
Mhm.
that people put into those realms. Usually that comes from generational trauma or some type of trauma experience. And we're seeing this more in schools, right? So if someone even thinks that there's something going on in school, it doesn't need to actually be a physical situation to cause that trauma. And so the reason why I would say that is you start to alienate people. And what I would say, if people feel alienated, is to work on core foundation skills that move them back into more foundational kind of feels. And here's what I mean. For me, my brain is thinking and connecting so many different things that there's times that I can't even catch up speaking, and it makes a lot of sense to me. But if you didn't know all the areas I was connecting, it would make really no sense for you. And so what I've had to do a lot of work on is actually communicating in ways that other people communicate, not in ways that I communicate. Does that make sense? So I would say, if you feel like you're on a way away from the norm, then figure out, don't change yourself. I'm not changing myself. I'm changing the way I communicate. So I used to try to change myself, like, hey, I should do this and I should do that, and I ought to do this and I should look like this. I don't do that anymore. Now I'm trying to say, okay, how can I control what I can control, which is my language, the way that, maybe I posture myself, maybe if it's even how fast I speak, and slowing that down. But I can't really completely control the way that my brain got wired through all of my experiences. I can, but that's over tens of years. That's more strategic moving. And so those are those slower things. Does that make sense?
Yes. Any other thoughts around
Yeah.
this?
No, I think as now we're talking, there's more thoughts here, but I don't want to take away from the show. If I was thinking more broad, I would say that, it's when we look at careers and paths, one of the best advice that I've ever gotten from someone, Stan Davies, and he's a vice president of sales. I think he's even a senior vice president of a very large company. And he said, I try to put my teams together. And when I look at teams, I want to have diversity. I want to have someone who can hit a home run. I'm not a sports person, but everyone does sports analogy. He's a
Mhm.
huge baseball fan. Took me to my first Giants game, when I moved out here 10 years ago. And he says, I don't want to have everyone trying to hit a home run or I'll strike out a lot, right? I want people who can hit base hits. I want people who can swing for the fences. And so having that, not looking at someone of like, oh, okay, well, they don't fit into the role we're looking for. And really, hey, what is it that we're trying to achieve as a company? Or what is it we're trying to achieve on this project? Or, hey, what are we trying to, our ideal customer? What are we trying to do? And then putting people who really benefit you around, right? Does that make sense? To really round
Yes.
either the offering, the company, or the project.
Got it. So any other tips around business and neurodivergence before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I would say other tips is find resources. There's a lot of resources coming online right now, especially after the recalibration of going back to work and what does a new work look like. There's a lot of people who've kind of opened up and said, "Hey, I realize I've been remote before remote was remote work, right?" And
Hmm.
so for me, I've had that opportunity. But some people going back into that, they function really well, not in a traditional workplace, and it could be maybe the way their brain's wired. And I would explore that and find resources and really start to understand that more.
Got it. So we got a networking moment, Mike. Anybody that you'd like to network with? Anybody that should be reaching out to you? Why should they be reaching out?
Absolutely. So, network moment, I would say anyone who is trying to solve either a physical security or a cyber security challenge in their organization or selling into that, definitely reach out and can help there.
And so what would be a good way of getting a hold of you?
Best way is LinkedIn/in/Mike Salz. If you can't find me there, you can find me on Mike Salz on some platform, pretty guaranteed, or reach out to Jim and he has my contact information.
Well, and you can include some contact information in the show notes too. So,
Brilliant.
yeah, is there any like buddy in particularly that would be a good, how can I identify myself if I am being in a specific role or at a specific industry or to
Absolutely.
that would make me a good fit to reach out?
Yeah, definitely. So what we're seeing in my industry right now is it's been talked about for decades, right? But it's actually now feet to the fire, and that's regulation and compliance around IT, OT security. And so if you're a CISO, a CIO, or a chief security officer, those are the people who I'm really helping with every day.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing today, Mike. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
And until next time on the Prophets of IT, I am Jim Punzenberger, your host, the creator of the Managed Prospecting System. We're looking to generate new clients or partners. Be sure to check out managedprospectingsystem.com. Thank you for tuning in to the Prophets of IT. Please smash that like button, subscribe, and share.